Alright guys, it's time for the final Beast Wars power levels. It's the final one because there aren't any more Beast Wars characters to cover after this. And yeah, I mean, maybe I can try to do more of these with some other Transformers show, but G1 wasn't really consistent enough for that, it just did whatever it wanted. And Prime, forget it. The characters in that are exactly as powerful as whatever scene they are in needs them to be for it to be dramatic. You could have RC kill hundreds of Vehicons in one fight without taking a scratch, or two of them could grab her and she's just captured because that's what the show wants right now. If I were to try Prime, everything would be a vague extrapolation where it'd have to be like, well, in general, they're more often shown to fight like this. I mean, I might still do it, but it wouldn't be as definitive as Beast Wars. Anyway, since the last one of these got less than half normal viewership, your likes! Please give. And if you enjoyed this video by the end and you aren't subscribed already, please consider it. Like, seriously, if you want to get me to do a Prime version of these, it's already hard enough without the video being a for sure failure from the get-go. So we will start with Transmetal Megatron, because amazingly, before anyone else, he was the first of the Predacon Transmetals to be revealed. I mean, there are only 3 Transmetal ones on the Predacons, but still. Anyways, for once, the Transmetal upgrade is kind of an upgrade. While Megatron's fire rate seems to have gone down with his tail weapon, hilariously interpreted in this artwork like it replaces his arms, same as the old Dino head did, it now seems to do more per hit. It's nowhere near a cannon, like some people seem to think it is, as he had to charge it to maximum power in order to muss up G1 Optimus Prime's face, and it still didn't kill him outright, but it at least comes across a little threatening. Problem is, it's his only weapon now, so I'm going to set this as a 6. It's better, but it's still not impressive. As for skill, with Megatron's new robot mode, he seems to actually be more willing to mix it up a bit. It could be the confidence it instills in him, but he's still not a quick shot or a hand-to-hand fighter or anything like that. 3. Strength seems unchanged. He's still a large bruiser who can manhandle most characters, but the scale is shifted in Season 2 onwards because of the introduction of actual superpowered characters, so I'll put him at an 8. Lastly, his tactics were already maxed out, since Megatron is an excellent schemer, so I'm torn on whether or not I should give him an 11 or something like that in this stat. Like, normally you get a +1 from flying, and it does give him some more utility in a fight considering he can now airlift his units, and he's even capable of flying while in robot mode, so he can attack like that too. Though the skates are fairly useless. However, Megatron's tactical score really comes from his ability as a leader, and in that sense, it doesn't matter if he's the one flying or if he's ordering someone else to do the flying. We'll just give him an 11 out of 10 in tactics and say that it's complicated. Now, Tarantulas is probably the coolest Transmetal design in the show. Unfortunately, his Transmetal form is also the biggest downgrade in the entire series. This takes everything from him. Tarantulas used to have a 10 in weaponry. That's gone. Minigun spider legs? Gone. Versatile crossbow that can shoot explosives, blaster fire, and poison arrows? Doesn't have it anymore. Web launcher, shown to only be used once after this, and that's because he got his old crossbow back again for one shot for some reason. Hilariously, in the same episode, his final episode, he is also shown to fire his minigun spider leg attack out of the dots on his shoulders, but that's literally only one time. No, all of that is replaced with a normal, slow-firing pistol that seems like it does below average damage. An arsenal for a pea shooter. A loss of 6 points. 4. Skill is going down too, because now he's missing most of the shit that he used in a fight. He was never much in hand-to-hand, though you probably didn't want to melee his spider mode, which now you have less to worry about because he doesn't have his poison fangs anymore. He doesn't seem pathetic, but I'll put this at a 5 now. Strength, as always with this new form, is unchanged, and I wouldn't say that the shift to the newer, more weighted scale is enough to drop him in this category, so it's still a 7. Once again, tactics are worse. Most of his skills are now unsupported by his gear. He can no longer web sling away because he lost his crossbow, he doesn't have half the ability to incapacitate his opponents with poison, he does gain a fairly zippy vehicle mode, but it just doesn't make up for everything that this mode took from him. He's still a cunning mind, and he can still lay traps and be sneaky, but in a fight he's just not as adaptable as he used to be. It's a tragedy because he's so cool looking now, but he's just so bad because of it. Everything he does is overcoming his new constraints. 7. The Transmetal upgrade, finger quotes, cost him 10 points of combat potential, if you ignore the 2 outlier reuses of his old abilities in his final episode. I will say it again, Transmetal is not an upgrade. Probably should have been, but the way they wrote it, it isn't. Quickstrike. Of all the losers, Quickstrike is the biggest one. As a kid, I thought this guy was cool and dangerous. Now I realize that this guy sucks so hard, he makes the worst version of Cheetor look competent. Still technically a Maximal, he's just a big enough idiot to join the Predacons because they're mean and he likes mean people. For weaponry, he's actually doing okay. He's better than average, and that's a problem, because it's the one stat where he is above water, and it's not amazing. He has a venomous bite that seems to do a pretty strong amount of damage to a single target, and once again, he has a really slow blast attack. For some reason, all weapons got slower in Season 2 and onwards, and the problem with this weapon is that it can't even put out incapacitating damage on an opponent who's already 9/10 dead. So we are going to give him a 7. It's decent compared with what some other people have, but it still needs to be a lot better given everything else we're about to get into. Like skill, which he just doesn't have any of. I swear Waspinator lands more shots than he does throughout the show, and the universe hates Waspinator. Also, Waspinator has to draw a gun to shoot people. Quickstrike's gun is just his arm, yet he's not much of a quick draw. And then in hand-to-hand, forget it. I think this dude loses every fistfight he ever got in. Dinobot, who'd been shot like 5,000 times, blown up, and was on the verge of death, still handed him his ass in a fistfight. 2. He is slightly more threatening than a baby seal who hands you a club. For strength, despite all his bravado, he is waifish and pathetic. An arm wrestle with Rat Trap without cheating would not be a sure thing for this guy, and I don't think for a second he could beat either Blackarachnia or Air Razor. 3. And lastly, for tactics, the closest thing this idiot has to tactics is to go yeehaw and run straight down the middle, getting shot before he has a chance to fight back. Inferno is less of a berserker than him, and Inferno is a tough psychopath who enjoys pain, so it's not exactly a tactic that works for this poor idiot. Guy manages to get himself slagged as often as Waspinator while not being the world's favorite chew toy, just by being that bad at everything, and he's the worst at tactics, so 1 is the best that this idiot can achieve. He is a threat to no one healthy. He has a blaster built into his arm, and the early hominids in the show could probably take him one-on-one. Now let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum and talk about the Predacons' best unit, Rampage. The only thing that stopped the Predacons winning outright with Rampage on their side is the fact that he just did not care about the Beast Wars. This guy is the slasher villain of the Transformers, but even more dangerous. Jason, the Terminator, definitely not Michael Myers, none of them would even scratch Rampage. Sure, he wanted to kill all the Maximals for fun, but he also wanted to kill all the Predacons for fun. And if he did kill them, then he'd be trapped there with no one to torture. So his heart was in the suffering he could cause, but not the victory. You'd think that being literally immortal would have made him so all his other categories weren't stacked too, but no, this guy is way up there in each stat. For weaponry, he has his cannon, which is hands down the most provably powerful weapon we are ever shown in the show. In Code of Hero, with a single shot, he blows up an entire mountain. We never see it do anything near that impressive again, but every time it does get fired, someone winds up really hurt. Maybe Tigerhawk's Kamehameha is stronger, but we never see that land. What we know is, Rampage's gun is a tactical nuke launcher, and even if we make the argument that he could only ever do damage like that once and he wasted it, it still hits like a freight train every time he bothers. Which isn't all that often because his other stats are jacked too. He gets a 10. Then for skill, he's provably on par with Depth Charge at multiple points. He's a fast draw, a good shot, and a serious combatant with a sword. 8. Strength is most likely a 9, if not a secret 10. It's hard to judge since he loves toying with his enemies so much. We see at one point he and Depth Charge fighting over control of a blade, and they seem evenly matched. He could be letting Depth Charge think he can win, given what happens moments later, and he's shown to be strong enough to peel the metal flesh off of his opponents mid-fight for fun. But for sure, he's not as strong as Optimal Optimus, so 9 is fair. He's stronger than Rhinox, stronger than basically anyone else, even if just marginally. He's also probably physically stronger than Tigerhawk. For tactics, you'd think that he'd be a mindless berserker because, you know, immortal slasher villain who's a sadomasochist. But really, that's not the case. It's a tool in his playbook for sure when he wants to use it for fun, but he's shown to set up ambushes and make sneak attacks. Plus, he can prioritize missions above killing, as shown when he destroyed the Maximal base. He can taunt people into panic. He destroyed a whole colony with some serious security, which there's no way he managed to do just wading through their defenses without most of them simply escaping. He'd have to have stealthily disabled their ways to flee before making too much chaos. He's a relatively tactical fighter, all things considered. I'll give him an 8, and maybe I'm being too generous because of how scary he is overall, but I think it's honestly fair. And normally that'd end it for a character, but much like Waspinator, Rampage is a durability fighter, and this is a weird one, because, spoiler alert, if you don't know, mute this video until the banner on your screen goes away. As we understand it, Rampage died at the end of Beast Wars. I love the way Beast Wars ends, but they really needed to establish this a bit better. As far as we're ever told, Rampage was completely and utterly immortal, to the point where they were just going to dump him on a barren rock in space since there was no way to kill him. But instead, it turns out that getting stabbed in the spark with Energon would kill him, which is something Megatron already did when Rampage was introduced. They needed to set this up, and they needed to tell audiences that killing him that way would cause a massive explosion too, because that comes straight out of nowhere and it kind of undercuts his final scene. You could argue that he didn't actually die and just pretended to, though that would not explain why it had the effect that it did on Dinobot 2. But since unlike Waspinator, he is stated to have died, we will give him a 10 on the durability, even if it makes no sense that he actually did die. Then there's Transmutate, who's pretty easy, honestly. For skill, its body basically doesn't work at all. It can barely move. And I say it because in a non-canon comic book, Transmutate is a she, but in the show, Transmutate is only ever called an it. Anyways, if Transmutate ever tried to throw a punch, it'd probably snap off its own arm. So, 1. For strength, Transmutate is not a fighter who uses strength. They are strong enough to pick up an unconscious person, and that's about as far as we're ever shown. Probably couldn't resist being crushed by a none-too-heavy object with those flimsy limbs. 2. I'd normally give a +1 for the ability to fly in tactics, but I don't think Transmutate really understands what to do with that capability. Their main strategy in combat is to walk out and smile happily at everyone until someone shoots them first. I suppose it's useful no matter what, so I'll put this at a 2. And lastly, weaponry. Transmutate can basically flatten everyone within listening range using just the sound of their voice alone. It is literally described as too powerful, too indiscriminate, and too dangerous in the show. 10. Dinobot 2 is a tough nut to crack, because he gets introduced as one of the Predacons' new main enforcers, but then doesn't do much but stand around looking tough for a lot of the show. And when he finally is shown to do anything of note, it's really in direct comparison to the original form of Blackarachnia who he's fighting, who is consistently shown to have the upper hand until she injures herself. So for weaponry, he's got his bladed hands, which he doesn't use all that much, a single eye laser that's a lot slower than Dinobot 1's version of it, but does a ton more damage, seemingly some kind of incapacitating short-range pulse that he can shoot out of that as well, and a hologram projector he quickly loses. Probably all better than the original Dinobot's gear, but he is losing out on the shield, and it's not displayed very well in his showcase episode, especially considering the hologram projector is used against him immediately. 7. He seems to be pretty skilled, able to dodge a lot of Blackarachnia's attacks for the most part, though not all of them, getting badly injured by her at one point. So I think it's fair to put him on par with Blackarachnia here, but we don't see enough of it to make him her equal, and she does manage to put the pain on him when she's crushed under a tree. So 9. For strength, we are never given a clear indication. He seems like he's probably strong, as he's a bigger dude, but he never throws hands with anyone who has an impressive strength score. I'll give him an 8. Not Rampage strong, but pretty beefy. And then for tactics, we really only have the Blackarachnia fight to go off of, where she was consistently tracking him, outmaneuvering him, and outwitting him, until she accidentally injures herself. It's debatable how much of that was his plan. Like, it could have been something that just happened, and it could have been something that he intended fully, but it also could have been something that Megatron told him to do. So we'll just put this at an 8 and say that's fair. And then you might think that he's a durability fighter because due to Rampage's spark, he is shown to have some kind of healing factor, but it is literally only ever shown off once. And it wasn't even that bad of an injury. He was able to heal his arm and wake up from being unconscious, and that's not as impressive as what Rampage is shown to shrug off. Plus, spoilers, mute the video again, he also died at the end of the show, so I'm not even going to count this. Then we got Blackarachnia's Transmetal 2 form, which I've always hated because it looks exactly like someone I knew growing up, just with a dumb mask in photo negative. Who is in this list because she was originally on the old Predacons list, and the other Transmetal video was getting overlong already. But unlike Tarantulas, this does seem to be a real upgrade. For starters, she is absolutely stronger than she used to be, able to throw hands with Rampage and swing him around hard enough to throw him through a cliffside wall. She's not going to be as strong as him, I'm sure, but she is rivaling him. 9. For skill, she's obviously as good as she ever was, being the highest skill-based fighter in the show, just now with even more muscle to back it up. 10. For weaponry, like Tarantulas, she lost a lot of what she had, but unlike him, she gained a whole bunch of stuff for the trade-off. She has powerful blades built into her hands now that can cut through other melee weapons. She has a long-distance tether she can use for a variety of attacks and maneuvers. Oh, and she gained powerful telekinesis, capable of throwing an I-beam hard enough to severely injure the strongest bots. So this too remains a 10. Now for tactics, she seems to have stayed exactly the same. She still has her web-swinging ability, and while she lost the versatility of her old crossbow, she has gained telekinesis. A pretty even trade. So she remains at an 8 here, as still one of the most OP characters in all of Beast Wars. And then lastly, Transmetal 2 Megatron. Not as big an upgrade in the show as people tend to think. It's definitely his most powerful form, but it's not one that really competes with the other strongest characters. For weaponry, he has both fire and ice breath. However, the ice breath is rarely used, and the fire breath, while clearly quite painful, is not as damaging as Inferno's flamethrower, as both were used to set Tarantulas on fire. But Inferno outright killed Tarantulas with it, and he survived Megatron's just fine. He never seems to incapacitate anyone with this attack, so an 8 seems fair. He appears to become more skilled yet again, as at one point he gets in a fight with Optimal Optimus and holds his own rather impressively, somehow coming out on top. But it's not more than, say, a 5. Strength I will put to a 10. He seems to be just slightly less strong than Optimal, and a single grab from him was painful enough to put Dinobot 2 out of commission. And then tactics, as always, will stay the same. 11 out of 10. His faction loses the Beast Wars because the Maximals are more dedicated and in general more stacked on stats. But if anyone's leadership alone would have won them the Beast Wars, it would have been Megatron's. And it's sad to see the end of this series, but it's always sad to see something of Beast Wars end. No joke, this video took longer to make because every time I put on an episode to confirm some statistic of a character, I found it almost impossible to stop watching said episode. So if you've not watched Beast Wars yet, and for some reason you made it to the end of the video, I'm sorry for the spoilers I gave, but give it a try. I'm sure you will not regret it. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.